If missions is just a program, programs can be cut. And usually when churches go through difficult times, programs are the first things we should and we do cut. Well, when missions is just a program, you cut it, right? People will cut their missions or outreach department budget before they cut their marketing budget. They'll cut missionaries before they cut, extra staff member that they don't need. I mean, these are just real hard conversations.
Yeah.
And so if you want missions, the philosophy of the Great Commission, to not just be a sermon topic or a sermon series or a program that your church does, but you want it to be a thread of the DNA of the life of the church, it changes everything.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have no idea where this is going to go today. The team just said, you guys got to talk about missions and the local church.
Actually, we're supposed to not have any idea where it goes if we want to be like Jesus and only say what we hear the Father say and only do what we hear the Father do. And that's why I don't like scripts. So
I know. Well, we haven't had one script yet.
Indeed. So we're being scriptural.
Why don't you kick us off with a story?
Yeah, okay. What kind of story? A church planting story. We were newly moved to this region in the northern mountains of the state of Puebla in Mexico. We got sent out to go pioneer. In other words, we got sent out to an area where there wasn't any churches established. And so it was a cool story how we got there, and I'd been there maybe a year, and I'd hiked down to the bottom of this 2,500 foot canyon or so 13 times before I got somebody to really let me in their house over this year. And so finally somebody is willing to listen, and so we make this relationship, and I didn't know it, but this guy was a witch doctor. But he was also a Jehovah's Witness.
Nice combination.
Yeah. And one thing about that part of Mexico, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're very studious, and they study their Bible and their books and their literature, And so you can get to where you can tell, but they come compared to the, the sort of demon worshiping pagans that are normally there, they're closer to the light. And so anyway, we started interacting with him, and he knew about this demon-possessed guy that lived across the county, hours hiking from his house, and asked me, he said he's been going there praying for the guy. Well, I didn't know it was like witch doctory stuff that he was doing because of the vernacular. And he asked me, was I interested in going there to pray for the guy? And I said, absolutely. I got excited, because really problems are our greatest evangelist. And so he went and announced on the radio. We have all these indigenous people that live in all these dispersed houses and small villages everywhere. And particularly then, the public announcement board, so to speak, was this little local radio station. So they have these little battery transistor radios where they would tune in to the radio station, the indigenous channel. And so they would just give community announcements all the way down to, telling Fred that he needs to come to the county seat because so-and-so needs to talk to him. Will you meet me there? It's that kind of thing, And so it wouldn't be Fred, it would be Federico. But anyway, you get the joint, you get the point. So he gave this announcement multiple days, like 3 or 4 times over the preceding week, because we scheduled going there. And so he just announced to the guy, hey, I'm showing up with this gringo, and we're going to pray for you at your house. I'm just telling you we're coming. He was announcing to the brother of the demon-possessed guy what day and time we were coming, because he and I set up the date, and so you don't know, are they going to be there, are they not going to be there, that kind of thing. So anyway, So I picked him up. We bounced around there. We show up to this guy's house, and the demon-possessed guy's sitting in the yard. Literally, when I walked into the yard, he screamed and pulled his hair and jumped up and ran off into the jungle screaming. Right? So I'm like, I'm thinking, how can I lay hands on this guy and cast a demon out of him if he runs off, you know? Anyway, so we were there, and his brother, who was concerned about him and is trying to get him fixed. That's why he was dealing with the witch doctor, because they're desperate to try to get a solution, you know. And so I sat down, and I'm like, well, I'm here. This guy's Catholic, his house full of idols, and so I started witnessing to him. Well, there was another guy sitting there. He was sitting there waiting, and he never had met the guy. And he heard the radio announcement that this gringo is going to come talk about the Bible and pray for his sick brother. And unbeknownst to us, he had been for years on a journey trying to find somebody who could explain the Bible to him, because his priest wouldn't explain the Bible to him. And he was an adult. He was in his mid-50s at the time. This is probably about 2004. And so that guy learned to read because of his hunger to know the Bible. And then when he went to the priest said, you don't need to learn how to read. That's my job. Like you don't have the capacity to understand the scripture. That's why I have a job. So, you know, you shouldn't read the Bible. Well, that frustrated him, you know, of course. And so, but he stayed on this journey because God embedded hunger in his heart. And so he heard through this radio announcement. He hiked through the jungle 3 hours over there to show up at the guy's house, whom he'd never met. But because my witch doctor buddy over here announced on the radio, hey, we're coming over there to talk about the Bible, and we're going to pray for your brother, right? He heard that. He's over there. He's all ears. So the brother of the demon-possessed guy, who was our target, I went there probably 5 or 6 times. He never got saved. We never did get the guy delivered of demons, because he would run away or whatever, and then they wouldn't yield. They wouldn't get saved. They wouldn't get rid of their idols. And so I could horse the demon out of him, but just over time we've done that, and it usually causes a worse end result.
Sure.
So we're engaged in the gospel process, and it's a sad story what happened to the demon-possessed guy. The demons actually drove him to kill himself. And I told his brother, look, you think it's okay to have idols, but there's a consequence, and that's an open door for the devil in your house.
Yeah.
You need to yield. If you want your brother to get saved, you need to yield to Jesus.
Yeah. You're
saying that you realize this is the truth, but you're not going to get rid of them straight up. And so anyway, but Michael was this guy's name. And he got saved that day, and he invited me to come to his house. And then now he's one of our main leaders, and he's raised his grandson from the dead, and it's a pretty cool story. And so I like those kinds of things. We didn't succeed with the reason we went to those guys' house, but Jesus rescued somebody from hell that's now one of our main indigenous leaders.
Well, and I think it's one of the things that we have to realize. It's not always the obvious thing that we think God is drawing us into. Sometimes God uses something to draw us into so that he can accomplish something else.
Yep.
And so it's this whole process. We talk about this all the time. It's the thread of our conversations, obedience.
Yep.
You just do what Jesus asks. And a lot of times, most of the times, you're quite surprised by what he ends up doing.
Well, it's like it says in Matthew, as you go.
Yeah.
Preach, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons, cleanse lepers. You know, and so it's in this process of going, you normalize, and you have to turn and seize the opportunity. You know, that's what people don't understand. There's opportunities around you all the time. and it may be scary for you to think about engaging or like being outward in because if you get next to Jesus, he's going to cause you to care about people. And the Great Commission is not just for missionaries, it's for all of us. We're all hardwired for that. And so it's this as you go element.
Yeah,
and
I think people have asked me, how do you know what you're called to? When did God speak to you about your calling? And I'm like, it is as I go.
Yeah, well, whether or not we win souls is not a matter of calling.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
It's
So people
not.
say, how did you know you're supposed to be in this missions thing? When did God tell you and speak to you? And I said, listen, God spoke to me progressively over time, incrementally, and I can tell you epic markers and moments along the way. But if you're waiting for God to give you some lightning bolt from heaven before you obey, that's not the way calling works. Calling is clarified in the process of doing. And a lot of times, you got to do a lot of things that end up not being your calling in the process of discovering your calling. But it's obedience. It is one step at a time over a long period of time that translates into a life that realizes calling.
Yes. And so the setup and the design that God has designed is the incubator for all that stuff is called the local church.
Correct. And so let's talk about the church, because I know our team's like, when are they going to get to the actual topic? So we want to talk about...
I did good teeing you up there
You
just
did.
now.
You did. Thank you. Thank you for the transition. Because we weren't going to transition. We were going to...
The smart
rabbit a little
$50
bit.
word for that is segue. We segued into the subject.
That's a big word for someone from the South, right?
Yeah, and it's not that thing that you ride around on, that thing that guy invented, the two-wheel thing that's like really cool. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, we're diverting again.
Here we are. Yes.
Okay, so the local church and mission. So I love the church. It's kind of my backyard, having worked in the local church for so many years. Before that, I was a missionary, and I just love watching the local church come alive as they embrace this thing called missions. And local churches call it different things when they want to put a label on their department. It's an outreach department, missions department. And I know you have a little bit of a, opinion about some of those things. But let me say this in my experience regarding the church and missions. When I talk to pastors who say, hey, man, can you help us just evaluate our infrastructure, our missions, our execution of outreach? One of the first questions I ask them is, do you want missions to be a department, an event, a program?
Come on.
Or do you want it to be a part of your DNA?
Yeah, your culture.
Because it's very different, right? If missions is just a program, programs can be cut. And usually when churches go through difficult times, programs are the first things we should and we do cut. Well, when missions is just a program, you cut it, right? People will cut their missions or outreach department budget before they cut their marketing budget. They'll cut missionaries before they cut, an extra staff member that they don't need. These are just real hard conversations.
Yeah.
And so if you want missions, the philosophy of the Great Commission, to not just be a sermon topic or a sermon series or a program that your church does, but you want it to be a thread of the DNA of the life of the church, it changes everything.
Well, sure. I personally, this is me, my axe to grind. I don't think there's a question about what the Lord wants it to be.
Absolutely.
It's just plain. It's just written down, and it is embedded, maybe deeper than our DNA, maybe in the genetic code that makes up our DNA. It's just like that primal in the heart of God, I think.
Yeah, and in one of our episodes, we're going to talk to a mutual friend, good friend who's a local pastor who we have known for decades, and he gets this, right? Missions is a part of the fiber of the church. But I will say for a church to have missions as part of their DNA, it has to start at the top. If the pastor of the church, the senior leader, somehow is not involved in the conversation.
No, it's not gonna have a primary purpose. There's no way that it can get in the DNA. And you got this incongruency of someone underneath that cares passionately about it, and they're trying to push it uphill. It's not going.
Yeah, and then I would say the second thing is, if a congregation member wants to meet with a pastor, the pastor makes time for that congregation member. Well, you got to look at missionaries that you support as congregation members. And when they fly halfway across the planet to come back to their church and meet with a pastor, I have been shocked how hard it is for missionaries to get an audience with a senior leader. Now, they can get an audience with the youth pastor, the children's pastor, if they have a missions department, the missions pastor. But for a missionary to get an audience with a senior leader sometimes is extremely difficult.
Yeah, in some churches.
That, to me, in those churches that make it difficult, is a reflection that missions is not part of your DNA. It's a good thing you're doing, but it's a program. It is not a strand of your DNA.
Well, I mean, that attitude is not scriptural because there's a lot of risk involved when you're in other cultures. I mean, it's like there's risky things at home also, but we are subject to extra measures of risk, even from a civil standpoint, because when you leave your home culture and you go into another culture and another civil government, you don't have rights of a citizen, and there's like a strata of risk, and this is, people are risking their lives. And the scripture says point blank, those who risk their lives for the gospel should be doubly honored. And so how do you like what are you signaling when the attitude of those that have like more of a corporate structure, like this wall between the senior guy, and so he wants to kind of fly above that and doesn't want to be bothered, doesn't want to be asked by the missionary who needs money, and so he postures somebody like yourself. I know you've had to manage that dynamic and be the guy that really got the privilege of being the frontline guy that engaged directly with missionaries and in different positions through what you've done.
I will say though, in our context, I get it when a church gets super big.
Sure.
The senior leader can't meet with
everybody,
but he should meet with some. And you've had that benefit. When I was on staff, Vibrant Missions culture that we inherited,
sure, I had access to the pastors,
and so that was great.
And
then I met with some of the other dozens and dozens of people that were not necessarily integral to the DNA strand of the church's execution of a culture of outreach.
So
I get it.
Yeah,
I'm not
totally.
saying if someone's a pastor of a very large congregation and they support 50 missionaries that he has to have a deeper relationship with all 50 of them, but have a relationship with some of them.
Not practical, yeah, and the ones that are most like relationally integrated with the church, and that's good and that's proper and that's right. But there's something wrong if there's never any interaction.
Yeah,
and so that's not been my experience. Have I ever run into pastors like that? Sure, leaders like that. But in my life, that's not my personal experience. So I'm not sort of griping about, sort of this backdoor channel of, I've been traumatized. I haven't, but I know about the existence of that, and intrinsically, I know that we can do better.
Yeah, and I would say flip the script a little bit. If you're a missionary or organization that wants to engage with a local church, here are some of the questions I used to ask as a missions pastor when I talk to people. Some of them were consciously and some of them were internally. Some of the internal questions were, are you here to have a relationship with us, or are you here just to get resources?
Exactly.
Because and here is the risk we run on both sides. If missions is a program at a church, then transactional engagement is the thing that it promotes.
Oh, for sure.
But if it's part of your DNA, then relational engagement is what it promotes.
Yeah, and I know, like the attitude that a pastor or a leader is approached by what they discern coming from the missionary, because there's there's an ocean full of missionaries that have really rotten attitudes. You know, because that's me. I'm like, I can speak with authority on this side because I know a bunch of us that are like that, and we're training missionaries. And one of our tenet is, look, like demonstrated honor and respect. It opens doors, it never closes them. And so if I front load this attitude of this is a waste of my time, I want to get back to my calling, and so there's so much abundance here, and I'm assessing all the waste, and I'm aggravated, and I'm exuding that attitude, and I don't want to be there really, and I'm not engaged. And I don't demonstrate the fact, or I'm not thinking about the fact. No, Jesus died for them. So I'm on assignment for the kingdom of God right now. And if I'm not respectful enough from that standpoint to engage for a relationship and to have some purpose other than, and I get it. I understand what it's like to not have much support and wonder how I'm gonna buy fuel to get to the next meeting that I need to go from the meeting that I'm sitting in. All those things. Like I get the pragmatics, but pragmatics and circumstances never, ever, ever trump attitude and heart and God's intention. And if you let that stuff run over and you're just exuding this frustration, that don't, like, that's just intrinsically wrong. And so those things continue that polarization and the separation of this problem between the mission church and the local church.
Yeah, I would say,
among many other things.
The average missionary, I think, they do not understand that they have the ability to help a church shift its culture this way. Because missionaries don't want churches to be transactional, but they're part of the problem when they show up with a transactional attitude.
Straight up.
So if you're showing up to the local church simply to say, man, I hope I can get support today, well, don't do that. Don't even have that meeting.
That's right.
Your first meeting, your second, and I don't care if it takes 20 meetings, should be, can I connect with a pastor and the members of this church? Can I connect with who they are and what they do and what they're about? Because when you connect relationally, you now have earned the right to an invitation to present transactionally. You have to earn that right. You don't just have it because you show up. I remember, man, somebody told me, hey, there's a guy here at the counter, of the church. And he said somebody sent him to meet with you. And I said, well, I have a full day. Who's it?
Somebody?
But I always try to meet with people,
Yeah.
And he name dropped. He name dropped one of my good friends at another mega church that I know, and he said, this person told me to come connect with you. So I'm like, okay, well, he used the name of someone I love.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, another pastor sent him. I'm going to not meet with him because he's here. I'm meeting with him because of the relationship with the other guy, right? And so I meet with him and I'm like, hey man, so tell me. And he's like, oh, we're missionaries in Peru. And I said, that's great. Tell me your story. He's like, well, I don't really have a lot of time. This guy, and he name dropped again, sent me over here and said, to meet with you and to see if you could help us. And I wanted to know if you could give us $10,000 because we need to get back tomorrow. And I thought, okay, dude, we have to have a long conversation about your process. Because the answer is no.
You crossed the threshold in the wrong door, Betty.
It's like, first the answer is no. I don't even know what. Give me a story. Give me something. Allow me to hear what you're doing. And if the Lord then connects our hearts, let's figure something out. And so I think, and I mean, I know that's an extreme example, but I think it's not so different than when we get a meeting with a church and we're already teed up with our 3-minute video, our 7,000 pictures, our stats and facts. If that is how you approach your first meeting, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the church a disservice, because helping the church move out of a transactional type culture or environment requires people that they can connect with relationally.
Yeah,
and a lot of
straight up.
churches don't have a program-based missions culture because they want to have it. It's because they don't have relationships that can help them have a relational type culture.
Yeah.
And so missionaries can help, mission organizations can help churches develop robust, integrated, life-giving mission cultures if they show up to have relationship with the church. The church at the end of the world, at the end of the day, is the hope for the world. We cannot take the gospel to the ends of the earth and exclude the church.
Amen.
And we cannot say we want to work with the church on foreign soil, but somehow exclude the church in our home country from the process. It is a symbiotic, tight-woven tapestry where the field church, the sending church,
Come on.
and the mission church all work together to form a beautiful picture.
Well, that's what Jesus wants, and I think that's what most of us on all sides want. You know, and we got some problems on our side. You know, there's like a host of people that they don't bother to do practical things like, dude, maybe you should comb your hair and brush your teeth and
Oh, don't get me started.
don't wear a wife beater shirt.
You know,
and flip-flops
remember
and raggedy pants. You know, if especially if there's no relationship. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, fine. You want everybody to understand how free you are, but yet you need a partnership. I'm sorry, there's a way to go about things. That's not demonstrating respect.
Well, one of the
and
questions,
honor.
one of the internal questions I've always asked when I look at someone and just how they speak and how they present themselves, their attitude, everything, and even the way they're dressed is, can I put you on our stage in front of our people and it'd be a good move?
Right.
And sometimes I look at people as like, dude, I can't even put you in front of my wife and my family. You know, I won't present you to my kids, you know?
Exactly. I don't even want to get the janitor staff
Correct.
together and let you talk to them.
No, it's like,
Right.
and it doesn't matter if you raise the dead. I mean, I can't, you know, and so it matters that the whole package is presentable.
Yep.
What you do, how you speak about what you do, how you present yourself, and how you approach the conversation. Approach the conversation with love, with invitation, with a relationship, with kindness, and then with a real conviction that what you do is what you're willing to die for. You know, I have met people, and certainly you're like my apex model. You know, whenever I've talked to you, man, it's like, okay, there is nothing that's going to stop this guy. No obstacle, no gate of hell, nothing's going to stop this guy. And so it's very easy to come alongside someone like you. But on the contrary, I've met with people that I'm like, so man, how in are you? I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm giving it a try. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, you got to know that this is your thing. So it's the whole package that matters, I think, for the local church. And I think I'm looking forward to a day where more churches get involved relationally and more of the gospel goes to the ends of the earth on a long-term basis, where churches start moving from 1-year support commitments to 3-year support commitments to 5-year support commitments, and this desire to have a long-term commitment with the ones they work with and growing old together.
Yeah, you know what's hard from the mission side is because there's a front-loaded tension over the dynamics involved with the conversation. And everybody knows that when a missionary comes and they want to meet with a pastor, they want support,
Yeah.
right?
And that's okay.
And that's not wrong,
No, it's okay.
right? But so many people are stuck in cycles because it's hard for missionaries. Mission agencies don't really, the ones that I know about don't place much intentionality into setting up missionaries for success in their sort of partnership development training, because it's hard to have an honest conversation with enough sampling of pastors and leaders, the decision makers, the gatekeepers for the development of partnership. Okay, like for instance, can we open up a platform and run some situations that both sides can verbally process what's going on inside? You as a pastor, senior pastor, missions pastor that's looking for a way to express and fund the gospel because that's the heart of God and you're engaged in that to some degree. What are you looking for? And what is it that you think initially about the young family that comes in there, about the way they're dressed and about how they come across and about how they communicate? What the question you just said was, the example you just gave is, this person's not convincing me that they know they're called.
Correct.
That what they're convincing me of is that they're vacillating and they're going to be a part of the 80% of people that just collapse because of whatever reason. And so you have all these things that you're looking for. You as a personal person, the voice of God trumps everything. So it doesn't matter if it's a Billy Bob with crooked no teeth. If Jesus says do it, you're going to do
Correct.
it. But other than that, you think things when you see certain things. And to get somebody to verbalize what that is and to give it to missionaries to say, like, that's what we do. What we've done in our training is I've gotten my friends, we unload the tension of, okay, we're not here to have a support raising conversation. Can you now verbalize what is it you look for?
Yeah.
And then I'll tee up questions like, what happens if the young family comes in and sits down and their kids are unruly and they're pulling books off the shelf and the kid knocks the plant off the pastor's, desk and he's like, hey, dude, what's up? And we just love Jesus and we have this idea or we have this vision or whatever, versus the family who comes in and everybody's hair is combed and their teeth are brushed and they actually took a bath.
Yeah, and
they used an iron. How about that? And and their kids sit down. And it's like, and to verbalize that, to here's what I think, and then to get enough sampling of here's our value system and here's what causes us. Here's our matrix of decision making that removes the obstacles to open the door to develop a relationship. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it's hard to get that information.
Well, but I think
you know what I'm saying?
I do. I think what you said, we really need to anchor. You got to do everything in your power as a missionary to foster an environment that gives you the best chance to build a relationship.
Yeah, you gotta see the doors open.
It's not my responsibility as a local church pastor.
No.
Because I have 1,000 people wanting to build relationships with us. So what can you do that is different than the rest of the people vying for my attention to build a relationship? Because relationship is the only thing that's going to last. I want to close this out. I just remembered a great story because I think it illustrates something. We had a couple in our church that wanted to go to the mission field. God spoke to them. They knew it. And they submitted their prayer and their desire and their calling to leadership. And we all felt, yeah, they should do this, right? So they came to me, met with me, wanted to talk about support, and we were going to do support. But I said, okay, so tell me, how ready are you guys? They're like, well, we're ready, 100%. I said, well, okay, that's great. Let me ask some questions and determine how ready you are. and we asked
Let me see how you define readiness.
Correct. And they were strong leaders in the church. And so from a spiritual maturity perspective, no problem. They were
really
ready.
What they were saying is our decision's made.
Correct.
Yep.
And so I said to them, let's talk about your support. Let's talk about your finances. I said, how much support have you raised so far? And they were going to go to Asia, right? So country in Asia, it's difficult. A lot of trafficking situations. They're going to work with another ministry. So they were landing in a safe place, working with another ministry. But I was talking about how prepared are you financially? This conversation was a financial conversation. And they said, well, we raised $500. I said, like, $500 a month, or maybe they had $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, do you guys have any debt? Yeah, we have I think $9,000 of debt. And I said, you can't go. They're like, but God told us. And I said, listen, and I think this is such an important thing for us to realize. They said, but what about faith? I said, the Bible says faith is a substance. This is a substance. It's a quantifiable thing. None of us had unlimited faith.
That's for sure.
We have faith, and faith can grow and faith can contract, but faith is this thing that we possess and we have to work on. I said, let's imagine you have a bucket of faith. Now, God has given you 100% faith to do this thing He's called you to do. Do you want to, because He said, what about faith trusting God for our resources? I said, do you want to spend, while you're on the field, 90% of your time and your faith equity trusting God for food, trusting God for fuel, trusting God for rent money, trusting God for all these things because you didn't prepare, so now you got to trust God? Or would you rather spend 80% of your time in the faith quotient doing ministry and seeing God use you to direct your faith to miracles and ministry and in the ministry environment, and 20% of your time in this faith quotient, trusting God for resources? And say, I never thought about it like that. I said, yeah. I said, why don't you guys pause? Take 6 months.
Because you weren't telling them you can't go.
No.
We're not going to back you.
I said, give me 6 months.
You were doing them a favor is what you were doing.
I said, I will commit myself to work with you.
Let me help you.
That's
what you said, didn't you? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I said, we're going to get you to the field, I promise. But let me work with you. And to this day, they say it's one of the greatest things they ever did. Now, it was hard for them because they wanted to go.
Well, and
they wanted to leave.
You helped them expand their partner base. And now they have the basis to develop relationships. Those people, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. You have this connection. They end up being your prayer team. They end up getting invested in you. And they end up in the dark days when you think, what happened? Where is everybody? Those people weigh in. That's like the relational net underneath you. And look, not everybody's like Bruce Olson, Bruchko, who just went without knowing anybody, and he just walked off into the jungle and got shot full of arrows. That's a rare, very rare success story. Incredible story in missions. God told him to go. He went. I've got my own stories about not having enough support and having to stay the course. But what you're saying is very telling, because it's things that people don't think through, and you help them set themselves up for longevity. And
this is
you alleviate, you help them point their faith at things that would be more productive.
Well, but here's the power of the church, right? Where the church can come in and should come in is in this process. And you tell me now how you would feel if this same missionary couple showed up to you, how I'm going to describe it. So after 6 months, might have been 9, but I think it was 6 months, they had no debt. They paid off their $9,000 debt. They had, I think, $3,500 or $4,000 support a month, which was adequate for where they're going.
Yeah.
And they had enough reserve cash to buy a vehicle upon arrival.
Oh, yeah.
But how does that change? How you arrive and how you do it.
It alleviates massive stress.
And they told me, they said, this is how minutia it was. They were able to secure an apartment in the capital city and pay a year's rent and have working internet in their apartment the day of their arrival.
And see, we're sitting here talking about them being a positive example. They signaled all the things. Were they spiritually ready? Was their maturity level ready? But there were some practical things that weren't, and they also signaled to their sending church, their home church. They're not going to be like hard-headed.
Correct.
They're going to listen to us. And you jumped on their team. You got in the yoke with them.
Well, because
would you have gotten in the yoke with them if they said, "Well, I just can't wait. I'm leaving."
Yeah, I'm just here for support.
Yeah, right.
If it was a transactional thing from their side, I'm out.
Yeah.
But I will get in on the relationship.
Well, and every relationship requires Everything that it takes to be successful at relationship is everything that it takes for us to become more like Jesus.
That's right.
It's embedded in the process.
That's right.
That's why the kingdom is first about relationship.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the local church, the missions church, we have to get in relationship with one another, work together. It's the best way to help churches have missional expressions that are integrated in the DNA of the church. And if we can eliminate from both sides, from the church side, a transactional mindset, and from the missionary side, a transactional mindset, will help churches become long-term participants in this cohesive process called fulfilling the Great Commission.
Amen. And so if you're a pastor or leader that's resonating with this conversation and you're frustrated because this is your experience, I will be happy to talk to missionaries that they don't know any better, or they don't want to listen or whatever on the mission side. And I know Rion will be happy to talk with you and help you. Like we can be solution oriented for you, to get a better equation for the bottom line of the advance of the gospel, because I know that everybody wants this process to work better. I'm deeply in love with the local church. And so email us, gatewaytomercy@mountaingateway.org, and we'll be happy to see what we can do.
Yeah, and I will say to pastors out there, this is what our ministry does. At no cost, no charge. This is a free service that we provide to churches to say, let us help you. Because we believe it's our call. We believe it's our mission to help the local church design better, more robust mission programs, to evaluate what you're doing and is it in alignment with the DNA of your church. So if you say, hey man, can you just come in, talk to our missions people, to our staff, to whatever, and see how we can do a better job, we do that at no cost for any church who wants help. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining the Gateway to Mercy podcast today. Please like, share, subscribe, tell as many people as you can about us. And if you have any questions, any thoughts that you want to share, email us at gatewaytomercy@mountaingateway.org. Have a good day.